Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our text, Esperanza Rising. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, why do the field workers want to go on strike? Why are some field workers resistant to the strike? Meaning, why don't they want to strike? Press pause, write down your answer, and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question today is what are the contrasting perspectives of the field workers about going on strike? And how and why did the two groups disagree? Our vocabulary words for today are recuperate, and that is when you recover from an illness. So this teddy bear is recuperating. Justice, which is when you want fair treatment. So we have the balancing of the scales. Is it fair or not fair? And perseverance, when you refuse to give up. All right, turn the page. And we're going to be using our CSPS strategy today as we read chapter 12, Los Esparagos or asparagus. We're on page 199, and we're going to be using, make sure you underline evidence for this CSPS strategy. We've got several pages to read, so we're going to get started. Marta was right. The strikers were more organized than ever. They handed out flyers in front of every store. They painted the sides of old barns with their slogans and held big meetings at the farm. For those who continued to work, there were still jobs, but Esperanza could hear the tightness and worry in her neighbors' voices. She worried, too, about what would happen if she didn't have a job. Asparagus would be a long season, sometimes up to 10 weeks, but it had to be picked before the high temperature touched the valley in June. The strikers knew if they could slow down the workers, it would affect the growers. So when the tender stalks were ready, the strikers were ready too. Esperanza got on the flatbed truck with Hortensia and Josefina for the first day of packing. All right, we'll stop right there because we have information about our character and our setting. And we know that Esperanza is worried about the strikers, but she continues to work because she needs to take care of her mother. She has to keep her job. So in box 1, we would write, Esperanza is worried about what the strikers might do because she is working. She needs to take care of her mother. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. You can write down this quote in the middle of page 199. She worried too about what would happen if she didn't have a job. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. And based on the information in the first page, we know that it's asparagus season or that it's spring. So we know it's before June and it's asparagus season. And we know that Esperanza, Josefina, and Hortensia are on their way to the sheds to start the first day of packing. So in box 2, we would write, it is asparagus season, and Esperanza is joining Josefina and Hortensia in the sheds for the first day of packing. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. You can write down this sentence for your quote. Asparagus would be a long season, sometimes up to 10 weeks. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. Turn the page. The company had sent a man with a gun to ride on the truck with them for protection, they said, but the gun frightened Esperanza. When they arrived at the sheds, the crowd of women were shouting and booing. They carried signs that said, Huelga, strike. Among them were Marta and her friends, and they were yelling, help us feed our children! We must all join together if we are all to eat. Save your countrymen from starving. When Esperanza saw their menacing faces, she wanted to run back to the safety of the camp, do laundry, clean diapers, anything but this. She wanted to tell them that her mother was sick, that she had to pay the bills. She wanted to explain to them about Abuelita, and how she had to find a way to get some money to her so she could travel. Then maybe they'd understand why she needed her job. She wanted to tell them that she did not want anyone's children to starve, but she knew it would not matter. The strikers only listened if you agreed with them. She reached for Hortensia's hand and pulled her close. Josefina marched toward the shed, looking straight ahead. Hortensia and Esperanza stayed close behind, never letting go of each other. One of the women from their camp called out, "We make less money packing asparagus than you do when you pick cotton. Leave us alone. Our children are hungry too." When the guard wasn't looking, one of the strikers picked up a rock and threw it at the woman, barely missing her head, and the workers all hurried toward the shed. The strikers stayed near the road, but Esperanza's heart was still beating wildly as she and the women took their places to pack asparagus. All day, as she sorted and bundled the delicate spears, she heard their chanting and their threats. That night at dinner, Alfonso and Juan told how they had the same problems in the fields. Strikers waiting for them, and they had to cross the picket lines to get to work. Once in the fields, they were safe, protected by the guards the company had sent. But the lugs of asparagus that were sent back to the sheds, turn the page, had to be taken across the picket lines, and the strikers often slipped surprises beneath the harvest. Okay, so we're going to stop right there. You will need this later on in the parallel teaching, but on page 200, it kind of gives us part of the strikers' perspective. They want to feed their children. They want to make more money, and they want to be paid fairly, and that's why they're on strike. But the other field workers said that that's not something that they can risk. They can't risk, going a few months or a year without getting paid, because they have a responsibility to take care of their family. Okay? And so then on page 202, one afternoon, someone puts a snake in the asparagus, and it scares all the women. And now they're at dinner the next night. We're at the middle of page 203. "Can't they do anything to the strikers?" asked Hortensia. "It's a free country," said Miguel. "Besides, the strikers are careful. As long as they stay near the road, the guards don't actually see them do anything aggressive. Then no, there's not much anyone can do. It's the same at the railroad. I pass the picket lines every day and listen to the yelling and insults." "It's the yelling all day that bothers me," said Hortensia. "Remember, do not respond to them," said Alfonso. "Things will get better." "Papa," said Miguel, "things will get worse. Have you seen the cars and trucks coming through the pass in the mountains? Every day, more and more people. Some of them say they will pick cotton for 5 and 6 cents a pound, and will pick less produce for less. People cannot survive on such low wages." And we'll stop right there, because remember, people are coming in from the Dust Bowl, from the Midwest. You have these poor farmers who lost their farms during the Great Depression, and now they're moving to California because there's work there, and they are willing to work for very little pay, which means that the workers will hire them because it's cheaper. And so people like Esperanza and Miguel and their family, they were having to compete with these low prices. Turn the page. "Where will it end?" said Josefina. "Everyone will starve if people work for less and less money." "That's the strikers' point," said Esperanza. No one said anything. Forks clinked on the plates. Pepe, who was sitting in Esperanza's lap, dropped a meatball on the floor. "Are we going to starve?" asked Isabel. "No, mija," said Josefina. "How could anyone starve with so much food around us?" All right, let's keep going. Esperanza had grown accustomed to the strikers chanting while she packed asparagus that the moment it stopped, she looked up from her work as if something were wrong. Hortensia, do you hear that? What? The silence. There's no more yelling. The other women on the line looked at each other. They couldn't see the street from where they stood, so they moved to the other end of the shed, cautiously looking out to where the strikers usually stood. Top of the page. In the distance, a caravan of gray buses and police cars headed fast toward the shed, dust flying in their wakes. "Immigration!" said Josefina. "It's a sweep!" The picket signs lay on the ground discarded, and like a mass of marbles that had already been hit, the strikers scattered into the fields and toward the boxcars on the tracks, anywhere they could hide. The buses and cars screeched to a stop, and immigration officials and police carrying clubs jumped out and ran after them. The women in the packing shed huddled together, protected by the company's guard. "What about us?" said Esperanza, her eyes riveted on the guards who caught the strikers and shoved them back toward the bus. They would surely come into the shed next with so many Mexicans working here. Her fingers desperately clenched Hortensia's arm. "I cannot leave Mama." Hortensia heard the panic in her voice. "No, Esperanza, they are not here for us. The growers need the workers. That's why the company guards us." We'll stop right there because we have information about the first problem. In box 3, you would write, Esperanza is worried that the immigration officers will send her back to Mexico. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the solution. Go ahead and turn the page. Several immigration officials, accompanied by police, began searching the platform, turning over boxes and dumping out fuel bins. Hortensia was right. They ignored the workers in their stained aprons, their hands still holding green asparagus. Finding no strikers on the dock, they jumped back down and hurried where the crowd was being loaded on the bus. "Americana! Americana!" yelled one woman, and she began to unfold some papers. One of the officials took the papers from her hand and tore them into pieces. "Get on the bus," he ordered. "What will they do with them?" asked Esperanza. "They will take them to Los Angeles and put them on the train to El Paso, Texas, and then to Mexico," said Josefina. "But some of them are citizens," said Esperanza. "It doesn't matter. They are causing problems for the government. They are talking about forming a farm workers union, and the government and growers don't like it." All right, go to the bottom of page 207. "What happens now?" asked Esperanza. "La Migra will keep their eyes open for any strikers that might be back," said Josefina, nodding toward the 2 men stationed nearby. "And we will go back to work and feel thankful that it is not us on that bus." We'll stop right there because we have information for the first solution. In box 4, we would write, Esperanza and the other women go back to work because the immigration officers were only there to deport the strikers. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. Go ahead and turn the page. All right, top of the page. Troubled thoughts stayed in her mind. Something seemed very wrong about sending people away from their own free country because they had spoken their minds. She noticed she needed more bands to wrap around the asparagus bundles and walked to the back of the dock to get them. Within a maze of tall crates, she searched for the thick rubber bands. Some of the boxes had been tossed over by the immigration officials, and as she bent down to set one straight, she sucked in her breath, startled by what was in front of her. Marta was huddled in a corner, holding her fingers to her lips, her eyes begging for help. She whispered, "Please, Esperanza, don't tell. I can't get caught. I must take care of my mother." Stop right there. We have information for the second problem. Esperanza finds Marta hiding in the sheds. If she tells the immigration officers, Marta will be separated from her mother. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to stop. All right, in parallel teaching, we will pick up at this point. If you have time, you can keep reading the next page, but make sure you complete your paragraph. How does Esperanza respond to challenge? What do her facts reveal about her as a person?